Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Fradkin, and I'm a board member of the Sharon Stoughton League of Women Voters, and I welcome you all to our candidates forum this evening, whether you're watching on Zoom or watching on SMAC or seeing this days later in the recorded part. Our co-presidents, Joanne Blatt and Robin Zoll, are on this Zoom as well under the league logos, so Robin is timing this event. The League is a nonpartisan organization committed to voter service, and we can now welcome any student at an accredited high school or college to join our League for free. So please go to lwvss.org for more information or to join. We welcome men and women of all ages to join our League as well. The League is an educational organization and offers many interesting programs locally and at the state and national level. I want to thank this evening Ellen Penniman and SMAC for broadcasting this live on the government channels, 98 for Comcast and Verizon 24, and they will play this recording many times until the election June 22nd. Questions will be able to be asked during the forum via the Zoom chat feature. There is no call-in option to SMAC, so don't ask or try. Our Zoom chat is being monitored by our member Gavin Fraser, and the forum is being moderated by Judy Crosby, a League member who lives in Sharon. No question should be directed to just one speaker, one candidate. Both questions should be directed to both at all times. And just to let you know, we suggest you go on to speaker view so that you can see who's speaking well as opposed to looking at everybody else. And anyone who feels like muting their video can do that on their own. So if you don't want people seeing you, doing what I do, feel free to mute your video. Actually, now I guess I'm going to turn this over to Judy Crosby to explain the timing and to go on with the forums. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So the way this is going to work is we're going to start with opening remarks from each candidate. They'll each have 2 minutes for opening remarks. And then we're going to go into our questions. I will flip back and forth between candidates in terms of who answers each question first. So we're just going to alternate back and forth. There's no rebuttal with respect to questions. Most questions I expect to have a 2-minute time limit for each of you to answer, but there's one question that's a little longer that we will likely allow a 3-minute time frame for. So with that, our candidates that are joining us this evening are Mr. Mark Zemanian and Mr. Lou Gito, and we're very grateful to have you spending time with us. The entire forum is expected to last, I think we're scheduled till 8:30. And with that, I'm going to start with Mr. Gito and ask you to please share some opening remarks, include why you're running for select board, and what are the primary issues that Stoughton needs to address.
I'm Lou Gito, and I'm running because Stoughton is stuck and won't get unstuck until we have hard conversations that lead to decisions. We've known for over a decade that we need a new fire station, yet we have no fire station plan, no location, and no proposed funding mechanism. As a lifelong Stoughton citizen, I couldn't stand by and see the select board not provide a path to build a needed fire station. The role of select board member apparently isn't understood. What does this mean in concrete terms? Some say, if I could only wave a wand, I'd make all these things happen. Stoughton doesn't have unlimited funds. We need to build these infrastructure projects within our budgetary limits. In fact, Stoughton select board members have a magic wand. That wand is the bully pulpit. The wand will get results if used with honesty and maturity, and by treating the voter as an intelligent, thoughtful people who want what is best for the town. Collectively, we citizens are the town and want to work to make important improvements in our community. Someone said to me, people don't want their taxes raised. My response was, why should we? We need to have a reason we can agree with to do that. but we will if the need is there. The high school vote is a clear example. The job of the select board is to put forward to us voters those issues that need to be addressed. We voters decide if we want to pay for the fire station, the South School, and the police station as we did for the high school. We voters deserve leadership that does its job and trusts us to do ours responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. And now, Mr. Zamanian, same 2 minutes.
Thank you, Judy, for having me tonight. So my name is Mark Zamanian, and I'm running for Select Board because I feel that Stoughton needs somebody who will bring action to the board, who will roll up their sleeves, do the due diligence, and get the job done. I will work with the committees and our staff to move Stoughton forward. I can do this because of my current involvement in town government through the boards I currently sit on and the boards I regularly attend, such as the Committee of Finance and Taxation and Planning Board, among others. I will push to provide unity to Stoughton, putting our differences aside, and accomplish the things that Stoughton needs right now. My family and I moved here in 2004. I have been married 31 years and am the happy father of 4 children, 3 of which happen to be daughters. We own a modest ranch in a working class neighborhood, and I'm a tradesman, providing services to the elderly here in town and many others. I've been involved in town politics since 2014. I began as a town meeting rep. I currently chair Precinct 1. I also chair the Housing Trust Subcommittee, which is working on an affordable housing trust and also successfully passed a $750,000 COVID assistance program through town meeting. I was elected to the Redevelopment Authority in 2019 and appointed to the CPC, where I have worked tirelessly to ensure the 3 things that I offered our residents: transparency, accountability, and commitment to the job. And I think my experience and workmanship have proven that I'm the right man for the job then. And I ask you now to please consider me again and vote for me on June 22nd. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zamarian. So our first question, which is going to start with you, with Mark Zamarian, is do you have any conflict of interest according to the law? Yes or no? And what would you do if you did have a conflict of interest?
Could you define conflict? In other words, are you asking me if I currently have a conflict of interest?
So do you currently have a conflict of interest under the ethics rules? And yes or no? And if you don't, what would you do if you did?
So having just gone through the ethics training recently, it's something we're required to do every 2 years. I do not see that I have a conflict of interest currently. What would I do if I did have a conflict of interest? I think that has a lot to do with what the conflict is, but I would certainly remove myself from that conflict and make it public that I realized there was a conflict and step aside from perhaps a vote or participation in that particular situation.
Great, thank you. Mr. Gito, same question. Do you have any conflict of interest according to the ethics laws, yes or no? And what would you do if you did?
No, I don't, and I would follow the law if I did. I wouldn't put myself in a position where I would have a conflict of interest.
Okay. So, Mr. Gito, this next one, we're going to start with you. How would you, as a select person, manage Stoughton's debt for future needs? Please share your philosophy in general. And again, 2 minutes.
Would you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. How would you, as a Stoughton Select Board member, manage Stoughton's debt for future needs? Please share your philosophy in general.
Stoughton staff, did you say?
No, Stoughton's. How would you, as a member of the Select Board, manage Stoughton's debt?
Debt, okay.
Debt for future needs, and
of
share your
course.
philosophy.
By the way, I've been a selectman 3 times and have been on almost all the major boards in town. I've been active for about 50 years. One of the things that I have been asking the selectman and the town manager for the last 3 years is a financial management plan for the town, and one has not been produced. That's a very important thing in order to know how we're going to pay for things in the future, how we're going to pay for things like the fire station and so on. We manage the debt through what we put together as a budget, and we defend that budget at the finance committee and at town meeting, and make sure that that the things that we propose to do fit within that budget, or we ask for a debt exclusion or something of that nature in order to do those things that we can't do within the budget. I mean, that's basically what the job is in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. Mr. Zamarian, same question. It's in the chat, but I'll also repeat it. How would you, as a member of the select board, manage Stoughton's debt for future needs? Please share your philosophy in general.
Thank you for that question. I have been accused by my opponent of not understanding the role of the select board. I actually understand the role of the select board very well. And I can tell you that currently, having participated in just about all the public hearings at the Finance Committee for this last budget and prior budgets, Stoughton is getting closer and closer to its ceiling debt, or the ceiling for debt. And partly that is because we spend every dime we get. We don't put any money aside for either a rainy day or a capital project. We do have a stabilization fund, but the building stabilization fund, which I would look at as a capital fund for down payments for infrastructure, doesn't get money put into it on a regular basis. Instead, it's put into the general stabilization account. I look at our debt much the way I look at debt at home. I don't just go out and buy a car and then try and figure out how I'm going to pay for it. I like to have something to put down on that car. And furthermore, I want to know that I can afford the payments. I think Stoughton needs to, we have some of the finest equipment in town, but it's time to stop just buying and money grabbing every time a budget cycle comes up. We come and have a special town meeting so that we can spend any money that our town accountant conservatively didn't figure into the overall annual budget, fiscal year budget. That sort of spending really needs to be curbed. I believe firmly that the fire station can be built and paid for within our budget and within our borrowing capacity for the town. When I said what I said about a magic wand, yeah, be nice to magically have it all happen. However, that's not realistic. What is realistic is working with FinCom, working with the school committee and the various committees and boards in town, and ensuring that we're spending the taxpayers' money wisely. Only if, at that point, we find that we need more than that, would I go and ask the taxpayers if they had a stomach for a debt exclusion, like we did at the high school.
Thank you, Mr. Zamarian. So we're going to start with you for the next one. Which
Judy,
do you...
Judy, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's Zamanian?
Zamanian, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Quite all right.
I apologize. Okay. Which do you favor, a public safety building or a new fire station? Where would you want to locate the building?
So that's an excellent question. In 2019, the town, when I say we, the town put together a building committee to study that. The results from that study were a approximate $60 million building for a public safety building. that is just simply not within our budgetary means. There is absolutely no question the firemen need a safe place to work. We need other infrastructure projects in town, but we're speaking about the fire station, and in the working conditions and the condition of that building that those men and women are working in is simply unacceptable. Must be built. As far as the where, that's something that the building committee never seemed to address. So recently, the select board has taken over that process with town staff, and they're now going to seek a location. I have heard a number of things. I like the idea of tearing down and rebuilding the Freeman Street location. And one of the reasons I really like that is because it's property we own. The fire station functions there now. It's just that the building is unsafe. It was built in the 20s. That it's time to move on from that building, but not necessarily that site. We've also heard a number of discussions about a substation from the chief, the fire chief, in recent discussions. So I think what we're really looking to do is determine where that might go in the future too. Certainly the armory is a possibility for that. It's my opinion, unless the town staff comes back with a better location, and I've taken a drive with some of the staff and have been unable to locate one as of yet, then I think that the fire station belongs at Freeman Street.
Thank you, Mr. Zeman. Mr. Gito, same question for you. Which do you favor, a public safety building or new fire station? Where would you want to locate the building?
We need the fire station right away, and that's what I would propose we do. We have several projects that need to be funded, and the fire station, the South School, and other projects are coming along the line. The idea that that we could fund the fire station out of current funding, and then have to worry about the South School next year or the year after doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me. We have kicked the can down the road on the fire station for over 10 years, and instead of building it 10 years ago, and we should have, we've now put those two projects side by side, and there shouldn't be any competition for those. As I said before, the public safety building is out of the question. The fire station is important, and I'm not going to suggest where the fire station should go. I know that the Board of Selectmen did go out and look for places. The Public Safety Building Committee reviewed those and made some adjustments recently in terms of trying to deal with the armory. But I would look very carefully at what the information comes back to us as to where we can locate a building before making that decision. So I'm not going to go in prejudging that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. And I want to commend both of you, by the way, on doing a great job of staying within time. Mr. Gito, you are next for this question. If you could change one thing in Stoughton's zoning code, what would it be and why?
That is such a remarkably complex question.
And you have 2 minutes. Sorry.
Well, I don't think I'm going to necessarily take 2 minutes. I will say that I was on the conference call on the Zoom call on the planning board's proposal to put rezone the downtown and put 6-story buildings in the downtown area. That is absolutely crazy. I was on the master planning committee, and we were looking at the town of Stoughton as a place where the center would be the social center of the town. It's now going to be the economic center for the people who are downtown. I'm amazed that we are where we are in thinking about that. The idea of having the downtown be 6 stories high, with the post office area being 6 stories high, where we had thought we were going to have a green space, only to find out that that had changed just within the last few months, is remarkable. It's the idea of hiding the ball is not transparency in my sense, and I would have to go on a lot longer to deal with trying to answer your question, but we can't, I don't think, have a livable downtown and have 6-story buildings all in it, because we won't have any beauty and a good social center if
Thank you.
we do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Zamanian, same question. If you could change one thing in in the Stoughton zoning code, what would it be and why?
The answer is quite simple. We need to change our zoning to allow for a 2-part process: senior housing and affordable housing. And I bring them up in the same sentence because I think they're intricately intertwined. This town has a tremendous need for senior housing. We've had a couple of private developers make an attempt at overlays or to change zoning in certain areas. And what the private developers came to the table with were not advantageous plans for the town. They were advantageous plans for the developer. I think in this day and age, as a town, this is certainly a priority focus. I have been in conversation with our town planner and the planning board about this, as I have with the town manager, who shares my feelings and thoughts on the need for senior housing. I'm not even going to touch the downtown center because, frankly speaking, that's in process. Public comment will be open until the 18th of June, at which point in time they'll collaborate that information and represent it to the public. So from a public perspective, if you have an issue with any part of the zoning, the best option would be to follow that transparent path, reach out to the planner, or speak at one of the public situations. The senior housing component in town is important in and of itself, but it also requires an affordability concept to that. And that is something that my committee, the Housing Trust Subcommittee that I chair, is actively working on now for a special town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. So we're going to start with you for the next question. What are your priorities for development in Stoughton outside of the downtown? 2 minutes. I realize you kind of maybe just
Sure.
answered, but I'm sure you can expand.
Well, yeah. Thank you again, Judy. And you're right. I think my answer is going to be very similar. I have a deep appreciation and love for our seniors. I recognize the fact that there simply isn't enough housing for folks who are ready to give up the responsibilities of a home and live a more relaxed life where they're not worried about maintenance and things like that. I have many seniors that I deal with that simply don't have the money. I have been attending through MAPC and MHP, Mass Area Planning Council, and Mass Housing Partnership, a series on equitable housing and affordable housing in the state. The state has recently written into law the Housing Choice Initiative that will affect our downtown. So in any place that's within a half a mile of a commuter rail stop or some sort of public transportation. So I think that's going to play a factor. That's something the state itself is still kind of wrapping their heads around and learning about. This again goes back to one of the reasons we're working hard to get an affordable housing trust to the people. Until Stoughton writes in the zoning and makes the bylaws factual so that there's a clear and concise path for developers, it's a very difficult process. You have a lot of neighborhoods, my own included, some in Mr. Gito's area, who have adamantly opposed certain developments, not because they're against housing necessarily, but because those developments weren't good for Stoughton. So I think a clear path for Stoughton is the way to go. We need to show the developers what we're interested in as a town, and that helps the developers create the type of housing that we need. It goes back to the old saying, don't write zoning for the things you don't want, write zoning for the things you do.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. So Mr. Gito, same question. What are your priorities for development in Stoughton outside of the downtown area?
I agree with Mr. Zamanian in terms of needing housing for elderly people, but I also agree that we should have housing, not housing. I'm talking about industrial development in the areas of Campanelli Park and along Route 27. I've been very supportive of the sewer project in Park Street, and I think it's important that we continue with that and raise money from the tax base that will develop in that area. But we do need housing for people who are empty nesters, who would like to downsize. There's not as much of that in the town as there should be. Thank you.
Thank you. So this next question is a two-part question, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Gito. For the first part, you're going to have 60 seconds to answer, and then I will tell you the second part, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer. Okay. I could read the entire thing to you all at once, but I think it would get overwhelming. So we're going to approach it that way, and you'll give us your answers, and then we'll go to Mr. Zamanian for his. Okay. So the question is as follows. At the 2019 special town meeting, Article 18 proposed updating the town charter with gender neutral language, such as replacing Board of Selectmen with Select Board. This change was approved by the voters in June 2020 election. At the town meeting, one of you voted yes on gender neutral language, and one of you voted no. Please explain your vote and why you voted the way you did. So for this one, we have 60 seconds. So, Mr. Gito.
My goodness, we live in a world where women and men are competing for the same jobs, doing the same work, and we should not just say, oh, we're going to have select men, and we have select persons is what we have. And I have worked for many women who are extremely smart and who have viewpoints that, in my estimation, round out answers to questions that should be asked, and to think that we should just say we're going to continue to have select men in the 21st century, to my mind, doesn't make any sense at all. I have 3 daughters, and they are all competitive people. Thank you.
Okay. So the second part of the question is, how do you see the select board's role in influencing the cultural climate of Stoughton, particularly as it relates to marginalized groups such as LGBTQIA? And we have 2 minutes for this.
I see the role in terms of making sure that when we hire people, we do not consider that as an issue. When we give parade permits, we don't consider that as an issue. Whatever we do should be gender neutral and should not be the idea of who someone loves should be that person's responsibility, not mine, and not anyone else's. I feel very strongly about that. And I don't need to take 2 minutes to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Zamanian, it's going to be the same process. I'm going to ask you the first question. You'll have 60 seconds, and then the second part, you'll have 2 minutes. So, the first question, at the 2019 special town meeting, Article 18 proposed updating the town charter with gender-neutral language, such as replacing Board of Selectmen with Select Board. This change was approved by the voters in the June 2020 election. At that town meeting, one of you voted yes on gender-neutral language, and one of you voted no. Please explain your vote and why you voted the way you did.
Thank you, Judy. I would be the one who had voted no, but I will say, to be honest, I had no issue with removing the word select man and replacing it with select board or select person. That was a no-brainer. Men and women and folks of all gender identity serve on boards and committees in this day and age. That was a really, really simple part of it. My concern was that instead of removing the words him and her, he and she, I would have preferred a clause that allowed for the correct identification by the speaker of the pronoun that that person chose to be addressed as. And we had a similar situation at this past town meeting where a person spoke up and said, I do not identify as a miss anymore. Please refer to me as either my name or another title. We respected that at town meeting, and I respect that at every board and committee that I'm on and that I serve on and that I'm a part of, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This wasn't about gender neutrality at all. It was simply about a language issue that I had, and I tried to explain that but was cut off.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. And then the second question that ties to this is, how do you see the select board's role in influencing the cultural climate of Stoughton, particularly as it relates to marginalized groups such as LGBTQIA? And for this one, you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So this is interesting. The town has a remap or a racial equity municipal action plan that overlaps here a little bit. I think the role of the select board is much the same as what I just said. We're here to respect the individual. It is not my job or responsibility to tell people what they can and cannot do. It is their lives, and I have every respect for that. I feel that people, regardless of how they choose to see themselves, should feel that they're supported by their government, regardless of their sexual preference, their race, their ethnicity, or their identity. We should be treating each and every Stoughton resident the same, with fair and equitable treatment. We should be listening to every single resident, and we should be acting on those residents' requests, period. End of story. There really isn't much more to say about that. If we can learn to respect each other, we're going to have a much more cohesive town and unified town.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. So we're going to start with you for the next question. What is your most important issue in Stoughton right now, and how could your election impact that?
The most important issue, the most immediate issue in town, I think, is the fire station. It is a pressing issue that has been going on for far too long. But there's a lot of things. I mean, we have a piece of property that is blighting our downtown center right now because it's burned down for 13 years and still sits vacant and looking just like it did the day it burned. We have a process that we've just entered into for the possibility of building a new elementary school at the South School area. I am thankful to see that through my discussions, and I have talked to Joyce Husseini about this, they are looking at the possibility of combining schools. That brings the cost for our residents down significantly by doing that. I mean, there are lots of issues, but I really think that the fire station is sort of the one we're going to have to act on most immediately. I also think the way we handle our finances and our communication between boards and committees is really going to be important. We need to have an open line of communication with finance. We need to have an open line of communication with the school committee. That has been a little bit fractured. In all boards and committees, we have an energy and sustainability committee that really don't feel included in the town. I attend some of those meetings when I can, pre-pandemic. I just feel like, you know, if we're going to create a citizens committee, we should be dedicated to that and hear back from those people. We've begun that process. Far more communication between the CPC and the select board, and through our housing trust subcommittee. I've really had a wonderful experience working with the select board to bring some help to Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. So, Mr. Gito, it's going to be the same question for you. What is your most important issue in Stoughton right now, and how could your election impact that?
First of all, let me say that I am on the school committee's facility master plan committee, and we are the ones who, along with the superintendent of the schools and the school committee, put together the thought of having a combined elementary school so that we, in fact, could save money. I've been on the Board of Selectmen, as I say many times. I worked very hard to make sure that our board and the school committee worked well together, and that wasn't always an easy thing. Now to the immediate question of what is the most important thing. The most important thing is figuring out how we're going to pay for the things that we need to have. I have been asking the Board of Selectmen and the town manager for several years to have a facilities, financial plan for the town. And if we had that, we would know what we were able to pay for within our budget and what we would need to do to go outside of the budget that we have. That's the reason for having a financial management plan. And we have not had that. And so we've had debates as to whether or not we could do things within or outside of our budget. We have to come to an agreement that, in fact, we're going to get the things that we want to have, or decide that we're not going to have that and figure out another plan. but we're stuck, and we don't seem to be able to make decisions. The fire station is absolutely top of the list over 10 years in the knowing that we needed it, knowing in 1912 that we needed it within 2 or 3 years, documented.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Zito. We're going to start with you for the next question. Wow, this puts Sharon to shame for our town meetings. The most recent Stoughton town meeting went 6 nights and lasted at least 3.5 hours per night. What could you propose as a select board member to streamline the process? And I'm going to just ask our timer just to restart because she started before you spoke. So, okay, there you go. 2 minutes.
Okay, here we go. I think it's very hard in the environment that we're in with COVID and doing these things through Zoom. It makes it difficult for the speakers. It makes it difficult for the moderator, and we have to try to make sure that people don't just get up to speak when they don't have something to say. I mean, we can't stop them, but we have to implore people, I think, more to be respectful of one another's time. I don't think that I would try to limit any further the amount of time that a person spoke, because sometimes people have something to say that is very important, and other times people just talk because they want to. So I don't think that I have a perfect solution to your question. But I would say that mostly it is a case of the COVID Zoom issue. I think that our moderator has done a good job trying to control things. I think it's very difficult to do under these circumstances. And I see no time limit. 59 seconds.
Sorry, you're
right
actually
now.
on my, no, I'm sorry. You're actually at 9 seconds. I apologize. Our timer was having an issue, so I'm also keeping
Okay,
time.
I'm done.
Sorry. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Zamanian, before I move on to you, I'm just going to pause and ask if our timekeeper can kind of sort out the issue, because I apologize. I can obviously keep time myself, but you won't be. Neither of you can see it, and that's not as good. But Mr. Zito, you did great with the time on that. So Robin, can you your thing is partially covered by a black
I don't know
block.
why it's doing this, because, and then it just wouldn't, the various times would not work. I finally got it to work. Hopefully it'll do it this time.
Okay. Well, right now
understand
the
why I'm
blob is
getting-
only covering a little bit of the screen, so I think
I
we
know,
can probably
hopefully-
work with it.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing it, but I'm
Okay,
sorry.
that's all right. I will also. I've started
Yeah.
keeping time as well on my side, and
Okay.
and worst case, if folks want, one approach I can take is when you're through half of your time, like when you're down to 1 minute left, I can put up one finger if you can see
Yeah.
that, and then when you're down to 30 seconds left, I can give you like a 3, so you know.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
looking for another timer to put on the screen, but we'll
All right.
try to
We're
make
going to be a
it
little
work.
low tech for the next few questions. I think.
Okay.
All right. So Mr. Zamanian, the most recent town meeting went 6 nights and lasted at least 3.5 hours per night. What could you propose as a select board member to streamline the process? I'm going to start the timer. Here we go.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, it was a long town meeting. It was one that I happened to participate in as an assistant to the moderator. There's a great number of pieces that have to work with a virtual town meeting, and I'd just like to give Mr. Mullen credit. He did a fantastic job with this virtual town meeting. Unfortunately, we haven't had him as a moderator in a live action town meeting yet, but There was a good deal of time that was sort of accumulated or wasted. But I will tell you, this was over the last couple of years, I have seen a steady increase of brand new members, and they're asking fantastic questions. And they're starting to get results. One of my precinct members has made a complaint about the Glen Echo Boulevard Road, and the town now has that on their radar to make repairs to it this year. Yeah, when people start as town meeting reps, there's a little bit of a learning curve for them, but so their freshman year can be a little difficult for them. But by the time they get to their second year, they're in the groove. They're attending our finance committee public hearings. They're involved. I am passionate about our form of government. I think it works. It is a process. There's no question about that, but it's an intentional process. One that this year we saw residents participate in, residents that weren't town meeting representatives. The moderator allowed them to speak, which is a part of what we do from our charter. I've often been accused of being a charter purist, and I happen to wear that badge proudly. I think this is a wonderful form of government, and yes, it can be a little cumbersome from time to time, but it works, and I'm proud to be a part of that process.
Thank you, Mr. Zamarian. Okay. Zabanian. Oh, I'm going to get this right.
You got it that time. The second time was good.
Second time. I don't know why. All right. So we have a question from the audience. Where are we really, and this is for you, starting with you again, Mr. Zamanian, where are we really with the hole in the center of town? When and what is planned for that? And if nothing before the end of this year, what is the timeline?
Yeah, what a fantastic and depressing question, to be honest. We have heard a number of times over the course of roughly the last year or so that this project is imminently starting. Demolition permits are being pulled any day now, and days and weeks and months go by. I have a respect for development. I have a respect for developers. This particular developer has blighted our town now for 13 years. It's time for that to stop. We have had 3 approved site plans for this particular location. Most recently, one was approved by the planning board just a few months ago. Yet we look at that building and it sits there. As a select board member, I would have to enter into discussions with the developer and give him an ultimatum. It's time to move forward or give it over to somebody else for them to do the work. At this point, this property is a blight to our town. And I talked to our town residents, and for many years I heard hope in the businesses downtown that was going to happen soon. Most recently, I'm hearing hopelessness. They just sort of shrug their shoulders and say, geez, this isn't going to happen. That concerns me. So as a select board member, I would ask for the support of the other select board members to start. Put some hard dates on things, and if he does not meet those dates, start to apply pressure through finances, through fining him. That is allowable under the law, and I really don't see any other way to get a developer that's been sitting on something for 13 years to move. It's that simple. The town needs to apply pressure.
Thank you. Okay, it's going to be the same question for you, Mr. Gito. Where are we really with the hole in the center of town? When and what is planned for that? And if nothing before the end of this year, what is the timeline? And I'm going to see if Robin, there we go, we got the clock started.
She's got it going. I would go back to the change in zoning in the downtown as a point to start this particular part of the discussion. If you were a developer and you had a building with a building permit that would allow you to build to 4 stories and you have a zoning amendment coming up that may allow you to go to 6, it's almost like an IQ test. Would you start the process of building a 4-story building when you might be able to build a 6-story building? So I think that that may be a little bit of a hindrance to moving ahead with that building. I have been concerned with that building for many years. The developer has come in many, many years ago with a plan that didn't meet zoning. The planning board continued to entertain the project even though it didn't meet zoning, when they could have said, it doesn't meet zoning, come back when you do. But they didn't do that. So we've had false hopes for 10, 13 years. I don't know what the number is. It was October 9th of 2009, I believe, when the building burned. I would require the developer to build the project or revoke his approval. That's what I would try to do. And I would have to talk with with legal counsel to make sure that we did things properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. Okay. So we are going to start with you for this next question. How do you propose improving communication between the select board and residents? And we're going to start the timer, which is looking a little funky. Okay, I'm timing, so go ahead. Yep.
You are right? All right.
Yep.
We need to talk with the residents about the things that are going on in town, the projects that are occurring. We have to be willing to make sure that that information is very clearly on our websites. We have to engage them in where things are going, where the holdups are, how we can move things ahead faster. We have to talk with the boards and committees in town, get them to talk together about how to move projects faster, and just be as open as we can about the things that are occurring in the town. I don't think we have the best website in the world in Stoughton. Certainly, when you look at other communities, I think you find a lot more information much more quickly, and I think that that's something that we should be aware of and try to change. I think that we do a pretty good job in terms of the opening part of the selectmen's meeting, asking for public comment. Perhaps we need to find other ways of getting public comments in through emails, tweets, whatever, to let people know that they can communicate their problems and issues and ideas to the town, and to review those from time to time and talk about the things that we're hearing through or reading through those other mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. Mr. Semanian, same question. How do you propose improving communication between the select board and the residents?
Thank you, Judy. You know, I've had a little bit of experience with this over the last 2 years. One of the first things that I think is a glaring issue, aside from the website and the fact that it's not very user-friendly, is contact information. My phone number and email have been posted on the Redevelopment Authority's webpage on the Stoughton site. I don't know if any of I haven't checked it in a while, so I'm not sure if any of the other members have it up there, but there's no clear path for residents to be able to contact their select person. I agree we have citizens' comments, but I think we could do a lot better. They're not merely citizen suggestions. They're, residents with some sort of issue. And, I'll give you a great example. Recently, there's been a traffic issue in my area. And I got to bring it up at citizens' comments, but there was no follow through. There was follow through because I kept emailing the town manager, but there was no opportunity for me at the select board's meeting when they came back with their report to comment on that report. I've seen this with others. We had an author of an article who didn't have an opportunity to speak. He was the author of that article, but they says, I'm sorry, this isn't a public hearing. You can't speak. Well, if a citizen brings something to the select board, they should have an opportunity to react to the answer. And that lacks. So as a select board member, I would ensure that not only would I follow through with the residents, but that they had an opportunity to speak publicly if they disagreed with the decision that the select board had made or were given the option to make.
Thank you, Mr. Zemanian. So our next question, and just for our person who's popping them into the chat, it's on my list. It's question 12, just to make her life easier. Is, do you favor keeping with Stoughton's existing manager town meeting form of government? Why? And if not, what might you like to see instead, and why?
This one's for me, huh?
Yep.
Sorry, I got a little distracted there. I was reading it.
Totally understand.
Mark, I had the same thought. I wasn't sure.
We're gonna restart the timer. Hold on.
Just so you don't feel.
Yeah, I was like, okay. Let me know when I should begin, Judy.
Yeah, hold on. Robin,
Sure.
Yeah, 1 sec. Go.
Beautiful. Great question. I am, as I've said previously in another question, I'm a big fan of town meeting representative government. It's the second oldest, I believe, form of democracy in this country. The only one older would be open meeting, which in Stoughton could be a very interesting situation. But, the residents have an opportunity to elect us. The elections happen every year for this. I would encourage people to do more about getting to the polls. I'm not against town meeting representative. I think it works. I think that before we talk about removing this as our form of government, we really should learn how to use it. The charter is there. It is, for all intents and purposes, our Constitution here in Stoughton. And it rarely gets looked at, it seems. I'm constantly reading the charter. I'm no expert at it, believe me. There's a great deal to it, and some of it is rather vague. And we have a charter review committee, and it would be a wonderful thing to see the focus be put on some of those areas that were vague right now and sharpen those up a little so we had a clearer path. Good example is we don't actually in town have a clear and concise path for a public hearing unless it's a planning board or a zoning board of appeals situation. I have written legislation and presented that to the Charter Review Committee after they unanimously agreed that would be a good idea. So I'm waiting to see the results of that, and I look forward to putting that before town meeting representatives for their opinion and vote on that. But the long and the short of it is, I am a charter purist. I'm okay with that. I realize there's problems, but we can do better to learn our current system.
Thank you, Mr. Zemanian. Okay, so Mr. Gito, same question. I'm going to read it again. Do you favor keeping with Stoughton's existing manager town meeting form of government? Why? And if not, what might you like to see instead, and why?
At the present time, I would continue to keep the present form of government in place. I think that it's worthwhile to look at what the positive and negative aspects are of different governmental forms. I know that, and I've heard from many others, that our form of government is rather ponderous in terms of being able to make decisions quickly that need to be made. We have to, in many instances, call a special town meeting in order to deal with certain financial issues. And there may be other things, but I think it would be best to get a list of those things that are bothersome to people and bothersome to the governmental form that we have, because even we, the people who operate within our current governmental structure, find some of those things to be rather constraining in terms of being able to get things done. And we should take those things into consideration before we say, oh, we should go to this form or that form. I'm for studying things, finding out what makes sense, and then moving forward, rather than just having a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, we should do this or that. My particular opinion on something isn't as good as the combined position of many more people. That's what makes town meeting wonderful, because we have that opportunity to exchange ideas. I think that needs to be thought of. The question that you asked needs to be thought of in the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gito. So we have a question that came in through the chat. The last time this resident looked at the town's website, it was horrid. Is there a plan and budget to redo it and keep it up? And who is currently responsible for the website? We're going to start with you, Mr. Gito.
I do not know if there is a budget for that. I'm not sure who has principal responsibility for upgrading or changing the website. And I don't know if there is a plan to do that. That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zemanian, same question for you. The last time I looked at Stoughton's website, it was horrid. Is there a plan and budget to redo it and keep it up? And who is currently responsible for the website?
So I'll answer the easy one. We have an IT director, Trish Shropshire, who maintains and is responsible for our town websites. Interestingly enough, despite the fact that people aren't very comfortable with it, it was recently updated, approximately a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. It still has some work to be done. This is an interesting situation. I myself, who actively, probably daily, goes on the Stoughton.org website, even I struggle a little bit with finding things. It's cumbersome. It doesn't function well as a mobile application. Being, a tradesman, it's often the way I'm looking at things is through my phone. As far as a budget for it goes, to my knowledge, and having studied the budget, we did not include a rehabilitation of the town website in the IT budget this year. So if there was a need, then I think that would have to either come before town meeting at a special town meeting or perhaps the following annual. What I will say, though, is if residents are uncomfortable with this, the best way to get a solution or to solve the problem is to first and foremost let our staff know there's a problem. Trish probably rolls her eyes every time I talk to her about the website because I hate this thing. But, so she's aware. But I think if residents start reaching out to our IT department or our town manager or the select board, any one of those three paths would be acceptable. It might be a good thing to go directly to the select board and allow them to filter that into the IT department. Tricia's time is limited as she's really the IT department. She does have one helper, but that would be my suggestion to residents. Go directly and make the complaint. It's okay. Nobody will bite you.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. Okay, next up, do you think, and this is for you, Mr. Zamanian, do you think residents should be more involved in the select board's decision-making process? If so, how? And we're going to start the timer. Yep.
Yeah, that kind of overlaps to another question that we answered earlier about citizens' comments. And I really do feel that if a resident takes the time to come before the select board, it can be a daunting process. I remember it from so many years ago. You feel a little uncomfortable. It's, they're sitting in those big chairs looking at you. But I think that as a select board, if we start to take those citizens' comments, and I'm not saying that the current board doesn't take them seriously, because I believe they do, but if we start to allow residents to interact with that a little bit more, I think that would go a long way to satisfying the residents and their concerns about not having access to the government. I believe that access to your government is fundamental and most important in us to have a successful government function. So my personal experience, I've had nothing but good experience with our town staff. If I ask a question, I get the answer. I will admit that it's a little choppy at the select board level. So that would be why I'd like to see more transparency and more inclusion when it comes to residents' requests, comments, or concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. And Mr. Zito, it's going to be the same question for you. Do you think residents should be more involved in the board's decision-making processes? If so, how? And we're just going to hold on. Our timer is going to get reset. Okay. There you go. Go ahead.
Thank you. The answer is yes. I think that that they should be, and I think they should be in terms of when a project or a process is beginning. I think that the Board of Selectmen should go out and try to get information on what it is that the citizens want in terms of that particular issue, and then I think at various times during the process, if it's a project or a change in policy or a change in law, then people should know where that process stands. I mentioned before the rezoning issue in the downtown. That was pretty much a hide the ball issue from my perspective, and it shouldn't be. I think the fire station issue, the Board of Selectmen should have taken more responsibility for determining what direction they wanted to go in, and not blame the Public Safety Building Committee for all of the problems that were there. Making sure that people know where things are along the process on a project is very important. Giving them information, getting feedback on whether it's going in the right direction or not, and then reacting to that and being clear as to why you're reacting in the way you are is terribly important. It brings the citizens and the town together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zito. So we are going to be starting with you again for the next question. What can the select board do to facilitate the urban renewal plan to eliminate the vacant space in the town square and rehabilitate various properties in the area? Include green space plans, if any.
The vacant space in the square, if you're talking about the hole in the ground again, I think we don't need to go through that one more time. If you're talking about other space in the square, we have a lot of empty space, at least as you look at it if you were to fly in a helicopter above the town. You have all the empty space associated with the MBTA parking lot, the post office lot, and those are especially large and take up a tremendous amount of the downtown. I would make sure that we re-engaged with the post office to make sure that we were able to continue to look at that space as green space and public social space in the downtown in order to be able to get back to what the master plan initially was looking at. To do otherwise is basically to say that we're just going to give up on the master plan, which is what we seem to be doing in the rezoning that's going on at the present time. We need to develop our downtown. There's no question about it, but we need to do it in a way that makes sense for the people in the town, not the people who just own the buildings and the properties in town. I hope I've answered that question. If I've missed something, I have blown it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ajita. So, Mr. Zamanian, it's going to be the same question. What can the select board do to facilitate the urban renewal plan to eliminate the vacant space in the town square and rehabilitate various properties in the area, include green space plans, if any?
Thank you, Judy. So the urban renewal plan and the redevelopment authority, who was in charge of that, this failed in 2016 due to a lack of clear and concise communication between the select board, the redevelopment authority, and the planning board. The redevelopment authority will need the approval of the select board, which is why we have entered into regular discussions and updates with the select board to ensure they understand where we are in that process and how that process is moving forward and how it will affect Stoughton and the downtown center as a whole. If, you know, the master plan I have looked at in great detail, and although the post office was an option for open space, there were a series of other options. Firstly, the Church Green is open space and green space in downtown center. We could improve or expand upon that if, now that we have parking over at the Randolph Savings Bank, if we took some of the parking in front of Pacheco's and made that green space. Additionally, we could remove parallel parking from some of the areas and plant trees and put an open space there. That was all a part of that master plan as options. As far as what the urban renewal plan can do for the town to facilitate development, the urban renewal plan will be allowed to do a number of things. They could pick up properties and redevelop them themselves. They could provide infrastructure. They could work in tandem with a private developer through a private-public partnership. All of these things are currently on the table. The urban renewal plan is only being slowed down right now so that the zoning process can be finished and we have an actual bylaw before us to move forward. What that bylaw will look like is hard to say yet.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. So I have another question from the public, and we are going to start with you, Mr. Zamanian. Does the select board ever have involvement in election issues, such as approval to order ballots, deciding if Stoughton reduces the number of voting locations or not, how to encourage new residents to register, or is that under the total discretion of the town clerk and voting office?
Well, thank you. So the process itself falls under the town clerk. The town manager supervises the town clerk. So if the select board would or wanted to bring a proposal forward where they could ask that question or make suggestions, they would do so through the town manager, and the town manager would direct her staff in an appropriate fashion Mass General Law does oversee much of that process, and much of that process does fall within the parameters of the town clerk's office. To date, I have not had any particular issue with the clerk's office. Our agendas are always posted in a timely fashion. I always get a response from the clerk's office that's clear and concise. So I guess it would have to do with a particular situation. But if there was a glaring issue that the select board saw and wished to have taken care of, there's a path for that, and it's a transparent path. If that wasn't effective, then I think they should and could call the town clerk before the select board and ask those questions directly. Town clerk has been very open in communicating with certainly my boards, and I saw our town clerk be an active member during the process of establishing the warrants and timing for an annual town meeting this year and during the pandemic. So I think there's pretty clear and concise communication between the select board and that position. And I feel comfortable with that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Zemanian. Mr. Zito, it's going to be the same question for you. Does the select board ever have involvement in election issues such as approval to order ballots, deciding if Stoughton reduces the number of voting locations or not, how to encourage new residents to register, or is that under the total discretion of the town clerk and voting office?
First of all, I think the question starting out, say, does the selectman ever have? I having been a selectman for 3 terms, I have never done that, but I think the question should be, may the select board have involvement in? And I think that that's a different question. I think that determining whether or not we're going to have early voting or some other kind of voting should be, the selectmen should have some say in that matter in terms of making sure that the public has the ability to vote in term, rather than like some of our southern states who are looking to slow that process or stop people from being able to vote. The board of selectmen, in fact, hire the town clerk. The town manager manages the town clerk as she does all of the other offices in town. I think that the board of selectmen should be able to set policy as to what they expect to have in terms of people voting. I might have to check that with our town council, but I don't know of anything that would say we couldn't suggest that things be done in a certain manner if it was within the law and was, I would hope, would be helpful to the voters of the town.
Thank you, Mr. Zito. So this is going to be our last question before closing remarks, because I want to keep us on schedule to be out by 8:30. So we're going to start with you, Mr. Zito. Where are your favorite places to spend time in Stoughton?
My backyard, my children's homes. I have 2 living in Stoughton. Conservation land. I guess that's where I would spend most of my time. I go to some of the restaurants in town. I guess that's sort of answers the question, unless you'd like me to go on for another minute and a half.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Zito. Mr. Zemanian, same question. Where are your favorite places to spend time in Stoughton?
So I have 2 older adult children, but I also have 2 younger children, 10 and 11. And one of their, much to my chagrin sometimes, passions is hiking. They love to hike. And we have an awful lot of trails here in Stoughton, the Bird Street Conservancy. We have Glen Echo, just a ton of places to be. And we love hiking through those areas. I love to canoe with my girls down at Ames Pond. I often see people fishing. My favorite places are often with nature. I'm a huge lover of nature. I enjoy being in the wooded areas, and those wooded areas are very much advantageous to the town. They put people in general in better moods. There's much cleaner air to breathe. It's cooler when we have open space like we do. I just think it's a fantastic resource that this town has, and one that the CPC has in the past worked to build. Recently, we've had a couple of failed projects, and that was, too bad. We did not town meeting did not choose to save the Pleasant Street property, and the 5 acres on West Street was also rejected by the CPC. However, there was a 24-acre lot on West Street that I was very much in favor of saving, had done my due diligence and research on that, and that would be a great property to save. I know it's been sold, but I'm hoping it comes back so we can still maintain some of those wildlife trails and trails for us to walk on. We also have an agricultural base here in Stoughton. There's a barn currently, the McNamara Hurley barn, that the CPC is beginning the process of looking at as a possible rehabilitation. I think from the town's perspective, it would be important that we had a solid and good use for that, but that's where I like spending my time, with nature. And I would encourage more agricultural investment in this town by bringing farmers in to use the lands that we already own to produce locally grown food for its residents. I think that would be a fantastic idea and one I'm impassioned about.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. So we're going to move to closing remarks. Each of you will have 2 minutes for them. And since Mr. Gito went first for opening, Mr. Zamanian is going to go first for closing.
Sure. Thank you, Judy. I want to thank you for hosting and being the moderator tonight. And I want to thank Sharon Fradkin and the entire League of Women Voters for holding this debate tonight. It's really a pleasure and an important facet of our town government. So I thank you for doing that. I also want to thank the voters for listening tonight, for tuning in or participating, those who gave questions. That's an important factor. So you've heard some differences between myself and my opponent tonight. I think those differences speak for themselves. I feel that I'm the right person for this job. I'm the right person to move Stoughton forward at this point in time. 2 years ago, you elected me as citizens to the Redevelopment Authority, and I made 3 promises to you during that election. I promised that I would bring accountability, commitment, and transparency to town government in the elected position I was holding. And I think you've seen from my actions and from the history that I have done that. I'm asking you again tonight. You trusted me enough to do that, and I didn't let you down. I'm asking you again tonight. I will work for you through hard work and diligence. I am 100% committed to this job and to the residents here in Stoughton. This is about you. It's not about me. It's not a power thing. It is truly about you, the individual. I have always left myself available to the residents, and I will continue to do so. And I will serve as your select board member to the very best of my ability. And I promise you, I will devote myself to that job. I ask you tonight to vote for me, Mark Zamanian, on June 22nd, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zamanian. Mr. Gito, your closing remarks you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. if you look at me, you look at this gray hair and know it's all real. I've given about 50 years of service to the town. Ordinarily, at this time in my life, I'd not consider running. In fact, I'd resigned from most town activities so Julie and I could travel. I'm pretty plain spoken. I don't spend a lot of time talking if I don't need to. I try to listen a lot. I'm going to close with what I said at the start. Stoughton's stuck, and it won't get unstuck until we have conversations that are hard sometimes, but lead to decisions. I'm asking you to vote for Lou Gito for selectman. It's a 2-year term. I think I can help a lot in 2 years. As I said, I've given service to the town for 50 years. I know how a whole lot of things work in town. And I think I can help. Please give me your vote on June 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shito. I'm going to turn it back over to Sharon Bradkin for the League of Women Voters closing remarks.
Thank you. Judy, I want to thank you very much. You did a great job moderating, and thank Gavin for monitoring the chat and putting up all the questions. I'm sure it made it easier for the candidates to see the questions in writing. Some of them were long. I also want to mostly thank the candidates, because without the two of you being willing to come on and speak to the public, there isn't really any point to all of this. I want to let you all know that the League is having an annual meeting on June 24th, upcoming in a few weeks, and we are featuring Ruth Zacharin, who is a Sharon resident, but more importantly, is the executive director of the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. This is a free meeting, and we have opened it up. It's a Zoom meeting, and we're going to post the link to register on Facebook and Instagram and on the League of Women Voters site, lwvss.org. So feel free to check that out in the next couple of days. You're going to see the link. It should be a very interesting discussion. The League does have a position on gun violence already. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the League and the way it works, if the League is an educational organization that takes stands, and once they have a stand on something, they work in that direction to make it happen and to help legislation continue. So this should be a very interesting meeting, particularly with the local residents. The League does a lot of other things, and we've got a lot coming up in the fall. We're looking at a program, whether it ends up Zoom or in public. We hope public, but we'll see, on how to run for office, because we think there are people in town who don't really know how, but might like to. So we're going to work on some of that. We're looking at perhaps in the late fall or winter, a program that may be on Zoom on women in politics. So the League is constantly doing things, constantly studying things, and we encourage you to join us. Again, please vote on June 22nd. That is the one thing everybody listening can do. If you don't vote, you have no control over who gets into office and what they do. So thank you for attending our forum. Appreciate it, and good night.